The Conservative Party, in its common sense, nonsense approach to politics, has made the determination that it's just not worth bringing forward this legislation, and the Conservative government would repeal it even if it passes. Mr. Speaker, I believe that if we pass, they will hear very clearly from Canadians this is good legislation, and we hope to build upon it in the years to come.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Brantford-Brant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I proudly rise in opposition today to Bill C-63. Canadians, I know it's a shock to the member opposite. Canadians take pride, Mr. Speaker, in living in a nation where justice prevails. Freedoms are upheld and our most vulnerable, especially our children, are protected. Yet today, after 9 years of this failed government, crime is rising, leaving families across the country concerned for the safety of their loved ones, both on the streets and online. Online criminal activity continues to surge, but the Liberals' response has been to push censorship bills that force Canadians into a false choice between their safety and free expression. Instead of addressing the real issues, this Liberal legislation silences Canadians under the guise of security, creating bloated bureaucracies led by the Prime Minister's hand-picked allies. Canadians are bearing the brunt of this government's failures. Bill C-63 introduces a dangerous new provision, an offence motivated by hatred, which could impose a life sentence for even minor infractions under any act of Parliament. This broad, unchecked provision opens the door to the possibility, Mr. Speaker, that mere words alone could lead to life imprisonment. While the government claims that a serious underlying act must occur for this punishment to apply, that is simply not reflected in the text of the bill. Section 320 of the Criminal Code would be amended to state, quote, "Everyone who commits an offence under this Act or any other Act of Parliament is guilty of an indictable offence and liable to imprisonment for life," end of quotes. Laws to address the issues we're witnessing have been in place for decades, and the Supreme Court has ruled on them multiple times. We don't need new laws to govern hate speech. This government needs to grow a backbone and enforce the laws as they stand. Hear, hear. Earlier this year at the Justice Committee, the Justice Minister openly admitted that Bill C-63's new hate crime offence could apply to any offence, as long as it's hate motivated. He said the bill's sentencing range covers everything from minor to serious crimes, but that judges, handpicked by this government, will make sure minor offences don't receive harsh sentences. However, by leaving this to the courts, this government is being reckless. We can't rely on vague promises that the judiciary will fix a poorly drafted bill. Parliament needs to clearly define when a life sentence should apply, not hand over broad and unchecked power. This bill risks extreme punishments for minor infractions. As stated by a political commentator, the Liberals are using the guillotine of speech violations, and on the other hand, house arrest for career criminals roaming the streets exploiting a broken bail system. Only in Canada would that bizarre statement have application. Widespread concern from all sides of the political spectrum have been raised about Bill C-63's introduction of a so-called hate crime peace bond, with many labeling it as a pre-crime measure for speech. The problem lies in the fact that this provision would extend the power to issue peace bonds based solely on speech-related offences without clearly defining what constitutes such crimes or ensuring that they meet the criminal standard for hate. While the Liberals focus on banning opinions, that challenge the Prime Minister's ideology, Conservatives are dedicated to keeping Canadians safe, both online and offline, while also at the same point upholding and defending their civil liberties, a concept that's completely unknown to this government. Bill 6.3 reflects a government more concerned about creating a facade of action than genuinely, actively safeguarding Canadians' rights and safety. Bill 6.3 seeks to reinstate Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act, a provision, Mr. Speaker, that was removed by the Harper government, and even the Toronto Star, hardly a cheerleader for the Conservative Party of Canada, has deemed unnecessary for protecting Canadians from hate speech. Section 13, which was previously repealed for its overly broad and subjective application, allowed the government to censor speech without the need for criminal proceedings. Reintroducing this section would open the door to an extrajudicial system where vague definitions of hate speech could lead to a chilling effect on free speech. The new Section 13 would make communication of hate speech by anyone on the internet or other means of telecommunication subject to the jurisdiction of the Canadian Human Rights Complaints Mechanism. Standard of proof, not proof beyond a reasonable doubt, an extremely high standard, but merely a balance of probability, 50.01%. This is not only dangerous, but deeply flawed, as we've already seen the consequences when the Liberals attempted to appoint an arbiter under C-63, who had previously argued that, quote, terror was not an irrational approach, end of quote. This highlights the inherent risks in giving unchecked power to unelected individuals who may interpret free speech in ways that suppress legitimate voices. Section 13 would also pave the way for dangerous precedents like life sentences for hate crimes without proper legal thresholds. The Liberals have failed to provide evidence that such extreme measures would be effective in preventing hate when the laws we already have are not being enforced. We need to hear from legal experts and civil liberty groups to understand the unintended consequences that this could bring. What we really need, Mr. Speaker, is action. Action today, not years from now, and not censorship, which is exactly what C-63 does. The government should focus on enforcing existing laws and protecting ethnic minority groups by empowering the RCMP, the INSCT, and NSES to work collaboratively and quickly with local police forces and share intelligence to protect vulnerable communities. Directing CSIS to implement threat reduction measures and communicate threats to ethnic minority groups. To ensure the security infrastructure program provides real, timely funding to help community centers improve security. Rather than reintroducing Section 13 and limiting free speech, the government should enforce current laws and take meaningful action to protect Canadians. Mr. Speaker, it's no surprise that the Justice Minister is proud of the only piece of legislation he's managed to introduce since his appointment. Meanwhile, contrasts to the Conservative Party of Canada, who put forward 10 bills that offer real solutions to the issues Canadians face today. Even the Justice Minister himself, the bill's biggest advocate, the cheerleader to this failed Liberal government, admitted that it would take years for this bureaucracy to create and enforce regulations. Let that sink in. This widely hailed, very, very important piece of legislation is not going to protect families for years to come. That's the impact of this government. Announcements, no effective follow-through. According to his own logic, millions of taxpayer dollars will be wasted long before any meaningful protection or enforcement are put in place. Canadians deserve better than half-hearted reforms. They need a government committed to real accountability and actionable solutions. It's time for the minister to stop hiding behind buzzwords and start delivering results that protect Canadians day in and day out. As Shadow Minister for Justice, I stand firm in criminalizing and enforcing laws that protect our most vulnerable, our children. We must criminalize and enforce penalties against those who victimize children online or bully them digitally. We must punish those who induce self-harm or incite violence in minors. We must ensure strict bans on distributing intimate content without consent, including the rise of deepfakes. My Conservative colleagues and I believe these serious crimes must be investigated by police, tried in court, and result in a jail sentence. We will not support the creation of bureaucratic offices that do nothing to prevent crime or bring justice to victims. A Conservative government will protect our children and punish those who prey on them, not create more red tape. This past summer, the PBO revealed the cost of the Liberal government's Online Harms Act that would cost $200 million to create a new 330-person bureaucracy to enforce rules. Yeah, let that sink in. $200 million upfront, no protection, to create more work for a bloated bureaucracy. Rules that are still undefined. Canadians can't wait for 5 years, I say in retort to that question. This raises serious concerns about transparency, efficiency, and the potential impact on free speech. Even worse, this $200 million doesn't cover the additional workload for the Canadian Human Rights Commission, which will have to manage a surge of complaints about social media posts in today's cancel culture. The government has no estimate of how many complaints the Commission might receive, so it's very likely that the $200 million is just the beginning. To put that in perspective, the PBO's numbers reveal that the bureaucracy created solely by Bill 663 will be about 1/3 larger than the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, the agency responsible for ensuring the safety of Canadians in the air and on the roads. Additionally, the PBO's analysis shows that on a per capita basis, this new bureaucracy will be vastly larger than any comparable agency in other peer countries. Bill 6.3 should be scrapped just on the basis for its wasteful cost. It's absurd that while Liberals underfund the RCMP, leaving almost 1/3 of cybercrime positions vacant, they're proposing to dump $200 million and hire 300 staff for a vague new bureaucracy. I see that I'm running out of time, so I'm going to move to my conclusion. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are rightly concerned. In this digital age, we must strike a balance between protecting individuals from harmful content and safeguarding their rights. That's why the Conservative Party is committed to delivering common-sense solutions that protect our children and ensure their safety online without compromising the freedoms we hold dear. The bottom line is that Canadians are living in fear due to online harassment, and it's costing lives. They need real protection, not more liberal delays and incompetence. The Liberals should adopt the common sense solutions in Bill C-412 or call an immediate election and let Canadians choose real, immediate protections or another costly Liberal censorship scheme. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.